Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. The United Nations General Assembly addressed by the President of the United States and the President of Russia. That is world affairs, and very exciting, and I'll speak of the President of Russia and his ambition of a little bit, but we're going to turn to the domestic affairs of the United States of America, particularly the Democratic and Republican Party. I understand it's parochial when you're not dealing with fighting, as Mr. Putin said, an anti-Hitler war in Syria, but this particular contest requires as much detail as any international crisis. This is Hillary Clinton's email story at the State Department. I'm lost, and I welcome my professionals to help me, because within the last 48 hours, Mrs. Clinton has again attempted to explain everything to Meet the Press, and her campaign has attempted to fit together the pieces of information that continue to bubble up independently of the campaign, independently of, to my knowledge, any particular hand, pieces that don't fit together. It's as if you start a crossword puzzle and then you realize these are clues to a crossword puzzle drawing that nobody's given you yet. You're doing a puzzle that you can't see. So I'm aware that we have wonderful clues here, but they don't fit. They don't fit in the boxes. So I need help. David Drucker of the Washington Examiner, and John Fund of the National Review Online, and my colleague and co-host, Thaddeus McCotter, WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes. Gentlemen, I'm not asking for a solution. I'm just asking for help. Is it okay to be lost? Mr. Fund, I'll begin with you. I'm lost. Is that okay? Good evening, John.
Oh, sure. We've had a drip of revelations about Hillary Clinton's email on the server for months. It's like trying to figure out how to do a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle with only 500 pieces. So I'm confused. The way to look at this scandal is in three parts, very quickly. First, why did she set up the server? She set up the server so Freedom of Information Act requests, congressional subpoenas, and prying eyes wouldn't see what she was doing. What she was doing was, well, she was exercising her normal penchant for secrecy, and she was also engaged in doing business with the Clinton Foundation. And that's a no-no. That's what she promised Barack Obama she wouldn't be doing, but she was. So then the second thing that happened was Benghazi. And at that point, Benghazi created a potential enormous embarrassment for Secretary Clinton, giving her an even more important reason to use a private email. And the third thing that happened was, when this finally was forced out, when it became public, she thought she had wiped the server clean and none of her private emails would ever be revealed. But it wasn't wiped clean, because the FBI is the best technologists in the country, and those emails will eventually come out.
Okay, I feel better about not understanding. David, the Clinton campaign, do they understand? Have they got a strategy to deal with what Mr. Fund says is drip, drip, drip? I believe that's Chuck Todd's metaphor. Do they have a strategy at HRC?
Well, Mrs. Clinton has hired some of the best Democratic operatives in the business. I've worked with some of them as a reporter when they were on Capitol Hill and in Washington. And these are good people. But good strategists and good campaign operatives cannot fix a bad candidate. And what they're dealing with in Mrs. Clinton is someone who isn't good at connecting with people over and above flaws like this. And that's the problem they're facing. And, I think the perfect analogy, John, would be for everybody to remember Mitt Romney's flaws as a candidate. And if Mitt Romney were a Democratic woman, he would be Hillary Clinton. And I'm not being glib about it. Whatever she brings to the table, being just a likable, charming, and effective communicator those are not the qualities she brings.
Yesterday, David, you saw Meet the Press, or clips of it on Meet the Press. Is she exhausted by this? Has this worn her down? She's a strong-minded person, but it looked like she didn't know how to answer.
Yeah, look, Hillary Clinton's one of the most determined, durable politicians I've ever seen. She has fought through a lot, and she is, as you say, very strong-willed, and she deserves a lot of credit for that. But she is exasperated and frustrated. If she's not, that's how she looks. And I think part of the reason is I think she just can't get it through her. I think she strikes me as somebody who can't believe that this is what her campaign has devolved into. And I think part of the problem might be that she simply can't tell the truth. But I don't mean because she can't be honest. What I mean is I don't think that I don't think she can say, and John alluded to this, that she set up a private server because she didn't want anybody to ever have access to her emails. And when she did it, she didn't really give a thought or really consider how that might affect national security because of the information she trafficked in. That might be at the heart of all of this. But you can't say that. And that puts her in a bind, because then what is she going to say? She ends up talking, and this is what's so damaging, about lawyers and investigators, and all that does is keep the story going at 100 miles an hour.
Thaddeus, you have a question for our guest.
Yes, well, in short, it sounds, David, like she put her own political security above the interests of national security, and to admit that would be a disaster. Now, gentlemen, you're seasoned professionals. David's talked about the operatives and the quality of them on the Democratic side that are trying to help Hillary Clinton. Is there a way to get beyond this? I've just seen in the recent New York Times poll that Bernie Sanders is up to 35%. Is there any way to staunch this bleeding?
David?
Well, look, if it were me, I would hold a Chris Christie-style press conference and just let people ask me questions for 3 hours until they're exhausted. Let them ask me 2 or 3 questions. But I don't know that would solve her ultimate problem, because you're right. I mean, if you get to the heart of this, thinking politically above national security in the position that she was in is what's so devastating. It's why I've always thought this was so much worse for her than the Clinton Foundation, which is your run-of-the-mill, in the minds of voters, your run-of-the-mill, shady politics, as opposed to actually putting national security at risk, which is a no-no.
Mr. Fund?
I believe that Hillary Clinton is still the Democratic favorite for the nomination.
Yep.
Bernie Sanders is not going to be nominated by this Democratic Party. It's not going to go for McGovern Plus. And if Joe Biden enters the race, and I believe he will, she will have Oppo research DEFCON 3 and destroy him. And barring an late-minute intervention by Elizabeth Warren being drafted into the race, Hillary Clinton still believes she will be the Democratic nominee. She still believes the Republicans will nominate an extremist. And if they nominate an extremist, she believes she can beat that extremist.
Mr. Fund, let's turn the screw here. Bill Clinton made calculated remarks saying that this is being driven by the Republican Party. For the Clintons, is that a strength or is that a weakness to blame the Republicans?
Well, it worked in 1998.
It did. But there wasn't an internet and a bandwidth, and we didn't have access to things every 35 seconds, John. Things have changed. The technology is much more powerful.
Yes, and by the way, the irony of ironies is that Hillary Clinton's Nixonian behavior may trip her up, because just like Richard Nixon, she was so incompetent in handling new technology.
Right.
Nixon couldn't handle the tape recorder, the technology of his time, and she sure couldn't.
I know, daughter of Nixon. Let me press you on this, Mr. Drucker. Bill Clinton blaming the Republicans. Did you see that as desperation? I never assume that Mr. Clinton does anything without calculation.
No, and I agree with you. The problem here is it worked for Bill Clinton because people liked Bill Clinton. People connected with Bill Clinton, and so they were willing to cut him some slack. But they're not willing to do the same for his wife, because they don't feel about her the way they felt, and actually, in many ways, still feel about him.
Thaddeus, quickly for our guests.
So, in short, there seems to be no way to turn this around. My question then is about the president. How does this affect President Obama that this happened on his watch?
David?
I don't think it affects him too much. It's wholly a Hillary problem. I mean, look, you can go after the president on all sorts of things, but I don't think he's going to catch much draft from this.
Mr. Fund?
Hillary Clinton signed an agreement with the Barack Obama administration saying that she would make it very clear that she would separate herself from the Clinton Foundation and she would behave herself. She clearly violated the terms of that agreement. I think in response, President Obama has basically said, in so many words, to the FBI and the Justice Department, I think you should let the career people handle this, and whatever you need to do is fine by me. You're not going to see any political interference from me.
John Fund of the National Review Online, finding another way to talk about just finish it. David Drucker of the Washington Examiner, Thaddeus McCotter, WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes. There is a Republican Party, and when we come back, we're going to discuss the Republican Party and a new poll from the Wall Street Journal about the leaders, the non-politician leaders, and what we can look to in the immediate future. There isn't another Republican debate until the second game of the World Series, but who's counting? I'm John Batchelor.